This is so smooth.
It's Issues with Brian.
What this is a little thing I call Issues with Brian, and what I like to do is talk about issues on the open source repo. So we've actually had a lot happening in the last couple weeks, and it's because I've been actually so super hyper focused on interviewing as well as doing some other like really like I don't know, fire drills, as I guess you would call it, with work. GitHub Copilot actually took up a lot of my time as well. So I'm finally back on the horse, and I want to talk about some of these PRs that have been open for at least a couple of them in a couple of weeks, actually. So let's just actually jump in and scroll down and talk about them. So one thing I wanted to talk about, which is Vortex. Thanks for all your help. People profited you being busy. This PR, which Vortex, you jumped on this. It was like a sort of like a fever dream I had weeks ago. I know with Storybook, we've had the design.opensauced.pizza. And what this is essentially, this is a design system. It's a project embedded inside of the regular open source project. And if y'all don't know about open source is a project to find your next open source contribution. This works. I love it. I thank so much for the folks who've been contributing to this and keeping this up to date. But it is definitely time for us to think about documentation. About a couple months ago, I started adding documentation to the repo in anticipation of something like this. And this is really, the effort here is whenever I have to explain something like persistent queries and how the GraphQL works, it's always a diatribe or a tangent on stream where I have to just go and explain it over and over again, and which with good reason, it's actually pretty complicated, which is why the explanations, they tend to take some time. Let's go back to the pull request. So Vortex, who's been chatting us up here in the chat too as well, went through, added Docusaurus. Docusaurus is actually something that I'm actually pretty familiar with. The concept of it. I've actually not used Docusaurus before for any projects, but this was actually an early project that was deployed to Netlify when I first, back when I was working in Netlify. So I know of it from there. These are actually some of the similar folks who work on Yarn. They also work on the Facebook team as well. Some of them have left since. So that's what this is. And for the most part, I'm enjoying. Feels like Docusaurus is a Gatsby competitor, especially looking at the female. Yeah, and yeah, a lot of these folks were inspired by Gatsby because they use Gatsby for docs. React.js.org. Is it org? It is org. So this is a Gatsby site, and if you look at their docs, this is not Docusaurus. This is actually Gatsby. I think they were heavily inspired from this experience as well, or at least influenced. But for the most part, the way this is working, and you have to maybe I'll ask I'll ask you, Vortex, did you hear? My understanding is that it is actually looking at there's a lot of file changes. Let's see if I go into this, go into my docs folder, and what it does now is it's in addition to our docs folder itself, it's also adding some CSS. It's adding some static elements to also render everything that we need to get on the page. It doesn't really, in my opinion, it doesn't really get in the way of anything else that exists in the repository. There was a question around, should this live inside of OpenSauce or should this live inside of another repository? And I'd be curious of folks listening, what other folks are their thoughts if you have experience in having documentation for a project. In my opinion, especially in the beginning times of the docs, it makes more sense to be in the open source repository, mainly to help influence folks to actually contribute to docs and not create another hoop for them to create another PR for. There will be a point where the documentation, so if you look at the documentation, actually this documentation is a bad example because it's so simple, but there will be a point where the documentation gets complexed and then it should probably live in its separate repository. And this is my opinion speaking, so I'm happy to hear other people's thoughts. If you happen to watch the video after the fact, leave a comment below and your thoughts, and I'd love to hear that. Did not copy the stuff from static because the tooling issues and making static assets more complex for both repos. So current rationale is copy stuff over, eventually the branch, the docs are separate repo and a Docker image or Docker image. Okay, excellent. I also realize I don't have this going, I don't have tau going, but for the sake of this example, I'm going to run Docusaurus local, and we'll just take a look through how it works. Cool, MaxBase, what is up? Welcome into the chat. All right, so let's get into the open source repository. All right, so I'm just gonna open up, and I've actually already have this this installed, so it should just be a quick npm start. So there we go, docs. Oh yeah, that's right, yarn start. Use npm. Oh, you know what? You're 100% on that CD at the docs thing too as well. Got it. All right, so I did CD into the docs. This is where as I showed before, this is where all the context of the docs live. So we'll give that a second. Ooh, wow. If you have a issues with flashing lights, definitely look away from the screen. Not cross-link the npm scripts intentionally. Okay. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, MaxBase is a prominent developer in the open source world. If y'all are not following Max on GitHub, which that should be a thing. We should always encourage people to follow each other on GitHub. So, like, Max, if you have a time, drop in your GitHub profile too as well. So, folks, I mean, it's literally MaxBase, but folks can follow you over there too as well. npm star. Excellent. So now we got the localhost 3000 working. And there we go. And this is the documentation. So this documentation is stuff that I threw in there. This is essentially the question I get all the time, which is, what is open source? It actually clicks, well, this doesn't click. This clicks into the YouTube video that was created here on stream. So the same thing I'm doing right now gets put on stream. We've got the getting started guide as well, code of conduct, triager guide, which is another documentation that was excellent. I appreciate Vortex bringing this into the docs here. We've got some steps for resolving merge conflicts, which a great idea came up to actually create a video on this, which would be great to look at that and see how to do this specifically in the UI. Dark mode was a feature that came up recently. Thanks for living in a van, MT Foley. I will always say both of your names, but thanks so much for that. The documentation looks excellent. Also has some of the references and inspirations for that. And then also we've got the storybook, some new storybook editions. So some of the bigger, heftier features that we've done, or the updates that we've done in the last couple months, I've encouraged folks to include documentation. And the reason for that is because of this. We want to make sure that new contributors will always have a good way to get started. But also the other thing about open source is, in addition to contributing guide, there'll be user guides. So as opposed to logging into open source and not really knowing what to do next, the cool thing about this is that we can actually point people to documentation and have them look at their projects and go ahead and give us, well, you'll have some thoughts and ideas on how you can approach fixing this. Looks like I also have an older version. Let's see. Well, I have an older version of open source up. So this to me looks great. I think this is worth merging and iterating on. I don't think there's anything else that's left to do. Otherwise, we just fall into scope creep. So for that reason, let's just go ahead and get this merged. So as far as the code, the one thing I didn't actually accomplish was review the code directly. Yeah, I guess I should probably review the code too as well. So hopefully y'all don't mind me scrolling through the code and taking a look. I'm gonna go on a limb and say most of this was actually generated code. So um, yeah, for the most part, the nav bar, how this is set, like I don't have anything I'm gonna review on this. That all looks pretty legit. Um, Majority of these are gonna all be new files as well. I don't see anything that's like standing out or screaming out at me. I don't know if it's worth some of these colors. If this is part of the theme, that's totally fine. We could actually have a different theming system design as well. Um, and setting mode bat the script build JS. Yeah, I'm not gonna valid token. Is this a? I wonder if this is a generated. Is this generated test or script lib validate token test? Okay. I wonder why this was updated. Oh, I guess it's just the only thing that's getting updated is the indent. Same theme across all repos. Yes. Yeah, that'd be an interesting thing to approach to as well is consistent theming. Because open source has a design system that could be adjusted to be more consistent across the board. This is the first step in us actually having more projects to even consider having a broader design system. Cool, cool. Yeah, so it looks like there's some general fixes, and here's our light mode, dark mode, more spacing changes. Um, yep, all spacing changes that were in the storybook, which all looks legit. And honestly, let's just go ahead and look at that. Nothing really grabbed me as concerning. So looks good to me. Looking forward to iterating on this. Cool. What was the? Oh, Philip actually had some changes, which from the second review, everything seems tinily. Proposals, colors, docs are very nice. The React Native library I found that could create custom CSS. So, what was only thing left to do is cutting edge open source onboarding and Snowpack and Docker. Yeah, it'd be interesting what you. I'm a big fan of Snowpack, so I'd be interested in your approach on that because I actually have not used Snowpack in any sort of production project. Um, Also, I won't merge his PR. We'll just wait to address Philip's comment, which I don't know if you might have addressed it already. Second review. Oh yeah, mentioned previously mostly because I tried it before opening the pull request, couldn't handle the conversion. The Infima personal judgment, while the colors were more in line with open sauce, there were screens that were pure ugly without extending it a bit more CSS. So, feel the disappointed that my colors JS implementation I reverted to the defaults. Okay. Yeah, this might be something that, and this is because we're starting from zero. This like small iteration on colors, we can probably punt to a GitHub issue, as opposed to waiting for it to be solved here. So I lean personally on merging it as is, but I'll wait for Philip if you are around. If you're watching this, I'll give you a little ping. What your thoughts are on this, and if you wanted to provide a rebuttal for Vortex's comment. But other than that, I think it's good, and I am super appreciative of Vortex, all the work you've done. I can't wait to get this merged and to use it, and also start iterating on that. I will actually be publishing this to a docs.opensauced.pizza too once it gets pushed to production. So that will be helpful. The other thing the other thing I'll probably end up doing is setting up some proper infrastructure for Storybook as well. I've been dragging my feet on that, mainly also for all the things I mentioned up top with the day job. So thanks so much. There's some lists in the OP. Yeah. So I will, in my opinion, merge and create 5 new issues from the discussion. Yeah, I think that's a good way to go about it too as well. Because once this gets merged, other people can start jumping in and get involved in the docs. And I'm looking forward to encouraging more contributions, docs contributions. We do have Hacktoberfest coming up too as well, so those would be great contributions that I can actually do as Good First issues and Hacktoberfest issues as well. I'll probably be pretty involved in that in the future. And again, thanks so much for contributing to this documentation.
It's issues with Brian.